What is going on, everybody? It's Brody here, back again to answer another tennis question. Today's tennis topic is going to be, what exactly is a tennis string gauge? I hear it all the time. I don't know what it means. I don't know what these numbers are. Help. Don't worry, I'm here. So let's get right into it. So with tennis strings, the gauge refers to how thick or how thin the string is. So a 16 gauge string or a 16G, that is going to be the kind of baseline string. It's pretty thick, it's more durable, a little bit more control to it than some of the other gauges. Now here's where the tennis gauges can sometimes confuse people, but it's actually pretty simple. So if 16 gauge is the baseline, okay, then 17 gauge, what that does is it goes thinner. So a 17 gauge goes thinner than a 16 gauge. So when you go up a number, so from 16 to 17, you go thinner. And that stays true for any type of tennis string that you use. So if you go 16 to 17, you've gone thinner. If you go 17 to 18, you've gone thinner than a 17. If you go 18 to 19, you've gone thinner than an 18. If you go 19 to 20, you've gone thinner than a 19. And yes, a 20 gauge string does actually exist. I know, right? Crazy. And I'll get into why that's crazy here in a second. But the tennis strings and the gauges, those really do affect and determine how you play and what the ball is going to do when it comes off of your racket. So the 16 gauge being the most prominent and the standard essentially is going to be, like I said, more durable and more control. It's a thicker string, so it lasts longer, especially if you're using a lot of spin, which if you're using a polyester string, you most likely are. As well as with a multi-filament string, it allows the multi-filament to last longer than a 17 or 18 gauge string would. The thicker the gauge is, the more durable it is. So that's really where a lot of people will want the thicker gauges because they're breaking strings so often. They have all the spin, they have all the power they need. They just need help with the control and the durability side of it. So that's where the thicker gauges come in. You can even get down to a 15 gauge. Most people don't need to do that. If you're curious, you can, but overall, you probably don't need to do that. Don't. So anyway, 16 gauge, and then you go to 17 gauge. 17 gauge is going to probably be the standard for most of the thinner strings because that you're really only going to find 16 or 17 gauge. Very rarely will you find the 18, 19s, and 20s because those are so thin that they tend to lose their tension a lot faster than the 16 and 17 gauges. So they go dead a lot quicker. You have to replace them a lot more, and they just don't last, so you're spending a lot more money over and over and over again, whereas you could get the thicker gauges and just use it a lot longer. So, plus they break a lot faster. Since of how thin they can get, they're very brittle. Now, they're not brittle as to where they're going to snap the very second you hit the ball with them after the string machine, but they're going to break a lot faster than the 16 gauge because it's not as thick, so it's not as durable. There you go. Now with the 17 gauges, that's like I said, that's pretty much going to be the standard. The 17 gauge going to the 18 gauge, you're going to get a lot more spin and a lot more power because the thinner the gauge, it's able to trampoline the ball because the string is able to snap back in the racket, so return to its original position a lot faster, allowing the ball to come off of your racket with a lot more velocity and a lot more speed. So the thinner gauges will help you with that, as well as help create the spin because the string is able to move as much as it is. You can adjust this whether you have the thicker gauge or the thinner gauge, depending on the tension that you use. If you use a 16 gauge with a lower tension, you will get more spin and more power back from the thicker string while still having it last a little bit longer. If you go with the 17 gauge, it still won't last as long, but if you go on a higher tension, then you can get more control from that more power and spin string that it already is. So you have to find your balance, you have to find your sweet spot. Most of the time you can usually get away with going 16 or 17 gauge. I will say, as a little side note, the thinner you go in gauge, usually the easier it is on your arm, because there's not as much of a shock coming from the more durable strings that the more thin strings have. The thinner strings don't have as much shock compared to the thicker strings. That's what I was trying to say. I'm sorry if that was confusing right there. So sorry about that. Anyway, that's really what you want to look for with the thinner strings. So make sure that if you are looking for more spin, more power, you can go with the thinner strings. But if you want more control as well, try them first without going to a higher tension, just to see if you even like that style of string first. And then you can start bumping up the tension to whatever is recommended on your racket. There's really no reason to not try it if you really want to. It's tennis. It's all just for fun. For the most part, if you're playing professionally, it's not all just for fun. You're playing for money, and good luck to you. I salute you. You are doing this full-time career. Great job. Go for it. I look forward to seeing you in the Grand Slams of the year. But for us mortal players, we don't necessarily always need to go down to the thinnest gauges, because we can get our rackets restrung almost whenever we want, as long as the string is available to us and a stringer is too. So make sure to try these strings out if you are interested in them. Comment down below if you have any questions or any strings that you're using now and you're thinking of switching to a thinner gauge, so that I can help you along with that, because there's a lot of tennis misinformation going out in the tennis community, and I took it upon myself with this channel so that we can get rid of that and get the information from the people who have it to the people who need it. So with that being said, like the video, comment, like I said, down below if you have any more questions about different types of gauges of strings, and just subscribe to the channel so we can grow this channel and make sure that more people are coming and figuring out what is actually going on with this great sport of tennis. And as always, share this video with a friend if they are thinking about, what in the world do I do with string? It's solving string theory. It's not as complicated as the one you hear with like quantum mechanics and everything, but this string theory, it can get complicated, so just bring them on over to the channel. We'll get them taken care of. And as always, take care.